What's up, everyone? This is Matthew Dale here to help you play better, sound great, and understand more. And I thought I would discuss chord symbols in this video. Really complex chord symbols, like, say, something C major 7 sharp 11, can seem really daunting and complex at first glance. But if you understand the system of what a chord symbol is trying to communicate, things can be a lot simpler. So let's dive in and let's get started. All right, so I got a little line that I'm going to use to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. For all of these examples, we're going to be placing chords on the root note C. And in order to really see what's going on, I'm going to put up a C major scale. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. But music doesn't just stop there. We can keep going, in infinite ways, both directions. So I'm just going to keep going D, E, F, G, and another A, and we'll stop there, and you'll see why in a bit. I'm also going to place numbers on this as well. So C is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Now, in order to really get the most benefit out of this video, you all should go over to my website and download the Essential Music Theory cheat sheet. I break this concept down a lot further, and this free guide is really just so great for really clearing up all the confusing things of music theory. So hit the link in the description box below and download the Essential Music Theory cheat sheet for yourself. But until then, let's go ahead and talk about chord symbols. So I mentioned this chord a second ago in the intro, C major 7 with something called a sharp 11. And let's go ahead and just break down this full symbol into its individual parts. So I'm going to put kind of brackets around this. Now, the triangle here, which I'll get to in a second, is kind of part of the first part and the second part. So it's going to be included in both. So the first part here is going to be the triad in the root note. So what is the root note? Where do we begin this chord? And it's also going to give us an explanation of the triad, the first part of the chord, or the basic chord here. If I can get an A, there we go, triad. The basic chord of this element. And then in the second part, is it a 7 chord? Does it include the 7th of the scale? So 7 in question mark. And then in this last part here, this is going to give us the tensions that we are using. And I'll explain what tensions are. So tensions, question mark. And we could have something like this as well. So I guess there is kind of a fourth part to this. Let me get rid of all of this stuff. But C major 7, sharp 11 with a slash over an E note. And this E note is the bass note of the voicing. So what is being played in the bass? Those are the parts of our chord symbols that I want you to think about as we kind of go from the simplest form of chords to the most advanced form of chords. And let's go back to this idea of triads. So again, I mentioned that we're going to put everything on C for right now, but of course, music is all relative. This can be from any root note anywhere, but the first most basic chord that we have is a triad. And a triad just means that we are going to include the root, or 1, 3, and 5. So if we look over here, 1, 3, and 5 on our scale line here, these 3 notes make up our triads. And the first triad is just a major triad coming straight out of the major scale. And that chord symbol just looks like a capital C. That capital C is telling us to play C, E, and G, the basic C major triad. Now, you don't often see this written this way, but this also could have a small triangle like that, and that triangle means major. So from my earlier example, that's what I mean, that the triangle is kind of like the hidden part of either the first part of the symbol or the second part. We'll see how it comes into play in 7 chords here in a bit. So if you ever see C with a little triangle, that's going to mean C major triad if it doesn't have the 7. Our next basic triad is just a C minor, typically written with a little M behind it. It could also have a little MIN. I'll write all these down. Or it could have a little dash behind it as well. C minor. And a minor triad means 1 flat 3, 5. So rather than including the E, we're going to go one step back. We're going to flat the third to E flat and then play G. That's what that chord means. Now there's two other basic triads. We can have a C diminished, C, D, I, M, also written C with the degree symbol, and that's going to include the flatted fifth as well. So 1, flat 3, there's our E flat again, and then flat 5, G flat, I'll write those up. And our other basic triad is a C augmented, C-A-U-G, and to augment something, to make it bigger, also spelled with a little plus symbol. You can think of the plus, adding something, making something bigger. It's going to be C, E, and G sharp. So we made the chord wider. We went from this G here, and we're actually widening. We're making the chord bigger over to a G sharp, or we're including the augmented fifth interval. And of course, we have our E in there as well. So 1, 3, and sharp 5. Now, there's a couple of other formulas within triads that you should know. Something like a sus chord, C sus 2. Sus means to remove the third, so we'll get that guy out of there, and then replace it with either the second degree or the fourth degree of the scale. And everything really ties back into the major scale of the root note. If you understand your major scales extremely well, which is why I'm going to plug my Essential Music Theory cheat sheet again, I've got all the major scales written out there for you. If you really understand the major scale really well, you can understand all of music theory really, really, really well. So C sus 2, instead of C, E, and G, we're going to get the E out of there and replace it with the 2, which is D. So C, D, and G. Or if it's a C sus 4, like that, we're going to include the fourth, C, F, and G, which would kind of look like this on our line here, like that. Now, if you see something that's just written C sus, then you have the option as the performer. You can either play that as a sus 2 or a sus 4. That composer was not too particular in what sus voicing they wanted, so you as the performer can play either of those two chords. Still within the conversation of triads, we can add something to a triad. So C, and then I'm going to write add. We're adding something to the triad. I'm going to add 9 to it. Now, notice this is not C plus 9. That would be C augmented ninth, which would be a completely different chord. We'll get to what that chord would be here in a bit. So just keep that in mind for a second. So what is C add 9? Well, the C part, this guy here, part 1, is telling us that we want 1, 3, and 5. And add means that we're going to skip to whatever note that is and place it in. So 1, 3, 5, and then we're going to add 9 to it. So 1, 3, 5, and skip all the way up here to 9, our D. And this chord, I'll go ahead and play this because this is really a pretty chord. Here's all of our chords that we had so far. We had a C, C minor, C diminished, C augmented with that sharp 5. Now here's a C add 9. That 9, you can really hear that nice big old gap. Makes it for a nice, really pretty chord. Let me go back and play some sus chords here while I'm at it. So here's C sus 4. Sus is neither major or minor. It's something completely unique. It's a sus chord. So there's a sus 4 and a sus 2, and then back to our major triad. What about something like a minor add 9? We can do that as well. So C minor add 9. That would be what that chord symbol looks like, and that's telling us 1, flat 3, 5, and we're adding 9 to that as well. So here's what that chord would sound like. Really a nice dramatic chord. I really like the sound of that. Here's if I voice it a little bit differently. And notice I've got my 9 and 3 right next to each other, because if we look at our kind of note line here, 2 and the flat 3, the E flat, are just a half step apart. So that close tension there can be really nice for that chord. Really nice and dramatic. Great way to play a minor chord, or great way to voice a minor chord. Now, as far as the numbers of notes we're adding, there's really not that many. It's either going to be 9, 11, or 13. So one of the things that I hear people say really often is if they're really confused about theory or chord symbols like that, sometimes you'll hear something like, well, I don't know anything about those 9s or 14s or 72s. Like, there's really not that many numbers in play when we talk about chord symbols. We're either going to have like a basic triad, a 7 chord, or the other numbers that would be in play besides sus2 and sus4 would be 9, 11, and 13. And these 3 notes are called our tensions. So another way we could think of an add chord would be like a triad plus a tension note. Okay? So we're going and we got our basic triad plus one of these tension notes, 9, 11, and 13. So we could have C add 11. This would sound kind of interesting. It's almost sus because I have the 11, which is the same degree as the 4th. I could have C add 13, which is adding the A in there. Now, this is a little bit different if we really want to be particular here. This is a little bit different than, say, a C6 chord. C6 would be adding the A as well, but that would be 1, 3, 5, and 6. A C add 13 would be 1, 3, 5, and then a big gap to 13, because add is telling us to bypass the 7th degree. But for all practical playing purposes, those chords are the same. What about something like this? Here's an interesting chord, C add sharp 11. So basic C major triad, and then adding in the sharp 11, which would be an F sharp. That's derived from the Lydian scale. Now, if I saw something like this, I would also probably add the 9th in there with it. So I would probably add 9 in sharp 11, which would sound like this. And that's a much prettier chord. But I hope you get the concept of add. So add is triad plus tension note. Okay, so that covers our basic triads, all the different versions of triads, sus chords, and then add chords. Join me on the next part of this discussion where I go more into all of our basic 7 chords with added tension notes, and altered chords as well. Remember, if you want even more help in the topic of music theory, to download my music theory cheat sheet. Again, that's in the description below. My name is Matthew Dale. Play better, sound great, and understand more, and I'll see you next time.